In a new age of watchmen, a team of individuals, pooling their talents and abilities, come together to bring analysis, reaction, and comedy to the fold. This is their chronicle. This is Accounting Arc.
All right, welcome back for another fun episode of ARC. Today we're going to be talking about the right kind of lazy, which is a topic that I've been talking about for a very long time because I believe I'm the right kind of lazy. Not always. Sometimes I'm the wrong kind of lazy. But at my core, I believe I'm the right kind of lazy. And, in conversations with these guys, I was telling a story about my history, and I was like, this is where this concept comes from. So when I was a staff accountant at Grant Thornton, I was working on paper tax returns as we did back in the day, and I'm dating myself now. And I realized that there was a very inefficient process for getting information. You had to copy paper documents, physically write it down, and then enter it into Excel to get work papers that tied out, and then enter it from Excel into the tax software, and then get a return that tied to your work papers. Then you had to print it all out and reference it. And that was a pain in the butt, to be honest. So I said, why doesn't the computer do this for us? And then I, flirted with the IT guy until he gave me an extra computer and wrote a little script that did that. So it did OCR, put it into Excel, organized the Excel document in a way that could be uploaded into the tax software. I built a little program for that. And then it printed a beautiful work paper package pre-referenced for me. Now, in order to do that, we're talking about, 1040s, so small returns that were only a few hour budget to begin with. It probably took me 100 and something hours to write the script, test the program, get it to work, make it happen. So for my individual job, not that extra productive, although it was fun for me. I learned a lot. It was really a cool project. But when I did introduce it to the partner group, they ended up implementing it in a bunch of different offices. And then at scale, it saved a ton of time for people. So I believe that was the right kind of lazy because I was optimizing things that otherwise were very manual and painful and really, really boring. But this concept of the right kind of lazy is an interesting one to explore and an interesting one to identify in yourself. So what do you guys think?
Since you gave a tax example, I'm going to jump and give an audit example too, because early in my career as well, and I'm going to say late 90s, instead of going in manually, we were already in spreadsheets. At that time, it was like Lotus 1, 2, 3. And we were already working in the spreadsheets and we were bringing data in, but we were really just manually ticking and tying stuff still within the spreadsheets. So instead, I would grab the data and I would actually throw it into Microsoft Access. I think it was Microsoft Access 2.0 at the time. And I would run the analytics there and write the queries and do all the stuff. And same thing, could shave out a bunch of hours from that. And and to me too, that was the right kind of thing, because I'm like, why am I going to spend all this time doing all this manual stuff when I can just write a query and get it done in like 15 minutes instead of 4 hours?
Both of those examples make me think about, I attach it to value, right? And it's in both of those examples, the steps that you were replacing or optimizing or automating were not the value. But the value is a good tax return. The value is a good audit. And that's what you all as professionals bring to that role. Typing numbers or whatever the case is not part of the value. So to me, the right kind of lazy is isolating what is valuable and what is not valuable, and then trying to eliminate what is not valuable as much as possible so that you can focus on the value side of the relationship.
I think that's a really good point because value optimization is something that we talk a lot about in what we do in accounting, right? Is ensuring that we are providing the highest value for the services that we're doing as well as the highest quality. And there are times when you can be the wrong kind of lazy on the quality side And, I think recognizing that and focusing in on, is this going to optimize value and reduce time to get that value, but not reduce quality?
I'm glad you brought that quality aspect in because I think that when Byron was speaking earlier, it immediately made me think of Lean Six Sigma, where we're balancing lean, the efficiency, with the Six Sigma. Can we actually ensure the quality of what we're doing? And that also made me bridged my thoughts over to our whole concept of quality assurance within the profession, which is making sure that we are upholding the level of service and the integrity of the services that we provide, because people do rely upon what we do. The public relies upon what we do. So we have that balancing side within our profession of, yeah, we want to be the most efficient, but we also want to ensure that we are maintaining the quality of our work.
And in both of your examples, I would argue that you probably improved the quality of the output because you were not manually performing steps that are very prone to mistakes. So both in like focusing the value and being lazy, you in all likelihood improved the quality of the output.
Yeah, so I do a lot of interviewing for my team and actually help clients hire people as well. So one of the interview questions that I started asking to try and identify the people that are the right kind of lazy is, are you a maps person or are you a directions person? And so I ask this question and preface it and say, if you're going to a new location you've never been before, you have your phone with Google Maps, how do you interact with that to get there? And I would say most people actually answer that they're directions people and that they let Google Maps give them turn-by-turn directions, but don't first look at the map. Whereas there's a certain subset of people that say, oh, I look at the map and then I see how to get there. And then I ask Google to show me the optimal route based on traffic today. And I decide if I'm going to use it or not, based on my own experience and my knowledge of the map and how that works. And so I will ask you guys today, are you maps people or are you directions people? And how does that relate to lazy?
It's so funny because just recently I was mapping out a path that I wanted to go to. And to your point, I looked at the routes that were suggested. I wasn't totally happy with those routes that were suggested. So then I was, trying to add stops according to the path that I wanted it to take me. And ultimately, I could not get the damn thing to take the path that I wanted. But I just knew at this point, I know the path that I want. So I think I'm very much a maps person who wants to evaluate that path. And in talking about like optimizing, sometimes the optimization isn't necessarily for time. It's maybe for just the drive. I mean, I live out in the country. I like to take country back roads. And if I can avoid the highway, even if it saves me 5 minutes, I'm going to look at cows over brake lights.
That sounds like a much more pleasant drive to me as well.
That does too.
A little more smelly, but
It's so worth it though, right?
Yeah.
I'm also definitely a maps person because that's where I'm like, if I can't figure out where we're going, also if you run into a problem, you're only following where it is, and you're like, wow, now I don't know where I need to go or what's happening. So I like both. I like to see the direction. I like the directions as I'm going there. Byron, that the point of adding the stops, I never thought about that. That's brilliant because sometimes I'm like, no, I want to go this way because I know or sometimes it's like it tells you to take a left turn, but it doesn't take the factor that there's a ton of traffic going back where you're like, I'm never going to be able to make that left turn right there. So I got to go around a different way.
Right. The same is true at work though, right? Like when you're learning something from someone, you can say, hey, tell me how you did this. What were your steps? And then you can say, show me the map. Like, what is the end goal? How do we do this? And I can tell you from personal experience, I get paralyzed if I can't see the map. If I don't know where I am today and where I'm going and the different routes that could potentially get me there, if I can't see that map visually in my head, I can't progress. If you give me a list of directions, I will most likely not follow them. I will most likely disregard the directions that I'm given and the steps other people have taken and create my own route and my own path to get there, because that's how my brain works. And I don't do well with people telling me what to do, if I'm being honest.
Well, you know, it actually made me think about, and I think we already recorded an episode about like, you know, the leadership and things, you know, but I think you draw an important point of where maybe people who are direction people, when they're training map people, there's probably a challenge there, because as a map person, when I'm learning something, I'm asking the why, because I want to understand why each step exists to evaluate if I can get to that step faster. And direction people, when you ask them why, they're kind of like, because that's the next step. And you go, well, I understand that's the next step, but why is that the next step? And they actually get stuck because it's just, that's the next step in the directions. I can't get to the grocery store unless I take that right-hand turn. So it's kind of interesting, that distinction of map and direction people, and then even thinking about that in a training environment of, you know, how people teach each other.
So I really like transit examples because I think it's one of the places that we as humans have designed inefficient systems, right? Like roads in most cities are not pre-planned and designed. They kind of wiggle around and go to where things were back in the day, right? And so I find it really fascinating. And also there's a lot of studies around, you know, how people optimize transit. And so asking people how they think about that takes them out of the element of work and gets me to understand their brain a little bit better. And I would say the ultimate example of transit optimization with the right kind of lazy is slime mold. And so they actually used slime mold because what happens is slime mold innately goes the most efficient route from A to B. And so they put nodes on, you know, an effective physical map, and they put the slime mold to get from different points to figure out where the stops in the Tokyo transit should be. And so when they were designing the underground in Tokyo, they did this to figure out like what is the most efficient way to design the subway system to get the most effective places from node to node. And I think it's really fascinating to utilize lazy slime mold in that way. But I bring that up to say it is a natural phenomena to optimize what is happening in a route, right? And I think that humans are naturally programmed to understand that and see that big picture. And if we can unlock that in certain individuals, we can get rid of the wrong kind of productive and get more of the right kind of lazy.
I have no idea even where to go from slime mold.
Well, I mean, it's just a fascinating anecdote. Highly encourage
It's
anyone to read
incredibly
that study. It was
fascinating.
really cool.
That does make sense. I love the Tokyo transit system, so there's definitely some value there. How about I bridge that from but it's also not about just that efficiency. It's really about the effectiveness. And so while there may be times when there is a more efficient way to do things, what we really should be looking at is the effectiveness. And this is a little bit of where the quality comes in, but in the bigger picture of things in our map, it's what is going to create that outcome, which I think a lot of us, and I can't remember if we said it here, if we said it in our prep call, but really it was about the why. And we want to know why are we actually doing some of these things? Because if we know why or what outcome we're trying to create, we can figure out whether maybe it's the most efficient, but sometimes it's the most effective way. And especially the example I always like to use in this is human interaction. If we were in an efficient relationship, we would minimize everything. And people don't realize that efficiency is a minimization strategy. So can we minimize the amount of interaction? Can we minimize the amount that we spend? Can we minimize the amount of whatever it is we're doing? And in a relationship where there's two humans involved, that's not what we want to do. Because do we really want the minimal time with our significant other that'll spend the least amount of money? No, we want to celebrate. Or like Byron's path is a good example too. Like I want effectiveness. It's the experience of driving, not just what's the most efficient path for me to go on.
That's a really great example. It actually it did remind me more about living on a farm property, having farm animals and caring for them. Because I am a map person and I am a, let's say, right kind of lazy type person. But when we are doing things down at the barn, taking care of the horses, I am always trying to optimize, like optimize hay consumption, optimize bedding consumption, like optimize the steps that it takes me to get the barn done. And
He
what
also has a
I,
lot of data on this, which I think is
Oh,
fascinating. So
really? True
yeah,
accountant, measuring everything.
I actually I built an app to track consumption of things within the barn, and I look at that data. And but here's actually the kind of point of this is, while I'm doing all of this, I'm driving Nikki batshit crazy because she's not that person. She is the person who enjoys being down at the barn, doing those chores. Like, there's no rush to get it done. It doesn't matter about the hay consumption. It's the, cost of having horses and these types of things. So I've had to like dial it back because I've realized that it actually it isn't about all of those things. It's actually just about the time being spent there and the enjoyment you get out of those things. So apparently that was the wrong kind of lazy, at least in a human relationship that I want to
I
maintain.
think that was the wrong kind of productive,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I was gonna say too, because
That was
that's
the
a lot of
opposite
work to do all
lazy.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's fair
So that was the
too.
wrong kind of productive. But I do think if you translate that over into a working environment, right, and particularly in accounting firms, some of the things you have to do to learn, right? Like
Good
it
point.
is about the experience and about getting through the steps and understanding what it is to learn it and move forward. And I can say my father was an accounting professor, right? And he taught tax, and he used to make his students do a tax return on paper. And he just retired a couple years ago. And until he retired, the students had to do the tax return on paper. And the whole point of it was so that they could learn and experience the flow of information and see what schedule is tied to what and how does that work and how do you support those numbers, and not just have a calculator and a fancy computer program in the background spit out the answer for you once you put in the inputs, right? You have to actually take the numbers through the whole calculation to the end and figure it out. And I think that the experience of that is actually quite helpful for people to learn. And that does happen in the first few years in accounting.
Yeah, another recent example that I've run into, I've built some web applications in a no-code environment called Bubble, and the prior pricing method for Bubble did not, it was almost like unlimited cycles. No matter how you built your app, there was no limit on how many like cycles you could use. So they changed their pricing method to actually have thresholds of how many cycles you could use. And what I discovered is a lot of things I had done were incredibly inefficient, because it was going to cost thousands of dollars a month to keep this app on the platform in the way it was. So, but I honestly believe I had to learn how to do those things incredibly and efficiently to then come back around and actually be able to figure out how to make a more efficient process within the apps. And I was actually shocked how much I was actually able to make it so much more efficient once I was being evaluated on that. But I'm not sure I would have been able to, from day one, been able to build it in that level of confinement had I not built these really inefficient mechanisms initially, that to kind of create that learning experience.
Well, and since Liz went back to manually preparing tax returns, I can say too, when we go into like accounting system implementations, when a transaction is not booking the way that we thought it would book or showing up the way we thought it would show up, we go back to T accounts and we're like, so what, how is this, what should we have seen? What should have been the flow of transactions? And go back and literally map it out in Excel, but we still map it out and go, okay, here's the debit, here's the credit, here's where we should have seen this transaction come in, here's these other transactions that should have also affected it, and here's the final outcome. And then we go back and look, okay, what did the system actually do? What journal entries did it create on the back end? And where's there a step missing, or what actually happened? So yeah, sometimes you do have to go back to something that's inefficient to fix what's actually supposed to be efficient.
But it's inefficient and effective.
Ooh.
Right? It gets the answer,
Yep.
even though it's inefficiently getting there.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, when Liz was describing that, it actually took me back to accounting in high school when we played Monopoly for 2 weeks and we kept the books by hand. We literally had the logs. We kept everything by hand. It was incredibly inefficient, but we learned so much. We got all of those whys. So when we learned new ways of doing things, we understood the outcome better because of that. So it kind of enables that laziness later on because you now understand it. Like, I think that's part of the challenge of being the good kind of lazy. You have to understand why. It almost has to be intentional. You have to understand why it's good lazy as opposed to just lazy.
Well, which comes back to, you have to understand the why of what you're doing. It's not just a matter of going through the motions, like what is the outcome that we're actually trying to achieve? And for those of us that are maps people, it's like, this is where I'm trying to get to. How can I optimize from that? The one counter example I'll give too, though, I've learned to listen to Google Maps, because there's times I'm like, why are you taking me this way? This is the way I want to go. And I go that way and I'm like, oh my God, there's construction. This is why you took me that way.
Mm-hmm. There's information you didn't have.
That's exactly right. I just had this conversation the other day. Many times when when it reroutes me and I don't listen, I generally regret that decision to
How
not
often
listen.
do you actually listen, though?
That's a fair point, actually. That's
Just wondering.
well, all right.
But Donnie, I think you had some good definitions around effective and efficient. And then what was the other one? Optimize and innovate.
Oh, optimization and innovation. Yeah. So
I'd love to hear your thoughts.
efficiency and effectiveness I normally think of as optimization strategies. It's something that's already there, and I'm kind of like the directions. Here's the directions, and can I optimize what I'm doing to make it more efficient, but also balance that with effectiveness? But when we start to look at innovation, that's where it really becomes different, because you can't necessarily make innovation efficient. And it's a little of what we've already discussed. When I'm innovating, I'm running experiments like Byron's experiment on, can I build this app and use this thing, right? And it becomes more inefficient. And you need to, in effect, be, what is it? What did we say? It's the wrong kind of productive. But it creates that learning process, and the innovation really requires that you spend more time, and you're going to throw away time because you're going to try all these things. Okay, that doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. Oh wait, this worked. Okay, now I've got that, and now I can move forward with this piece that I figured out.
So it's about balancing the decisions. I think, Byron, you were talking about a chart you found, but balancing the decisions of how much time should you spend to optimize or innovate on whatever the issue is, right? And that's I think, discretionary decision in the moment. And you can be the right kind of lazy and work on these problems in a reasonable amount of time to get to a solution that's very effective, that is also more efficient. Or you can be the wrong kind of productive, and you can spend, 100 and something hours, like I did, optimizing and building an efficient process for something that I only spent, 100 hours on a year, but at scale made sense. For me personally, not so much, but I was gonna figure it out anyways.
Yeah, and I think, part of the challenge in that is sometimes we get really committed to an idea. And after it's easy to say, I've already put 10 hours into, trying to automate this very basic process that never in a year takes me 10 hours to do. But you're like, I've already got 10 hours. Now I have to finish it. And you may invest another 10 or 20 hours, automating something that you may only spend an hour a year actually doing. And so there's part of us that has to have like kind of this discipline to cut your losses. Spending 20 hours inefficiently to optimize something that isn't going to save you that much time is better than and never actually automating it is better than spending 50 hours to then automate that process that you're not going to spend an hour on. So it's really hard to stop doing something once you've kind of set course on it, and debate that decision of, is this a good decision to continue to optimize or be lazy?
I have ADHD, so I don't have this problem. I start projects and don't finish them all the time. I think that's a key hallmark of that diagnosis is get like super deep, super ultra hyper focused, and then all of a sudden be like, oh, this is boring. I'm over it and never finish. So I have a lot of half-built automations.
Yeah, I got a lot of those too, but sometimes you get on a bender where you're like, I've got to solve this. But a different example, Ryan Holiday talks about this all the time of like not finishing books. A lot of people will start a book and they're like, it is so terrible, but I have to finish. And it's like, why do you have to finish the book? Like, just put the book down. If it's not a good book, put the book away.
How many books are you in the middle of right now?
One. I only do one book at a time.
Oh
Donnie,
my
how many
gosh.
books are you in the middle of right now?
I don't know, like 20 maybe.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
my problem's a little different on that one. Real quick on Byron's one, the other one that I think applies to that is Netflix series, where like I started like I don't like this, but I want to finish it, and then I'm like I've started finally. I'm so glad they took the remove from my queue or whatever that thing is, because I can get it out there, so it stops reminding me that I haven't finished it.
Mm.
My problem with the books thing though is I start to read it and then I want to apply what I've just read. So then I go and try and find some things where I can apply it, and then I never come back to finish the book. And eventually I do it, and then I read another chapter and I'm like, oh wait, let me figure out I can apply that here. Let me try that. And I just get distracted like that.
I just like all the stories happening at the same time. If we're talking business books, there's probably like 20 that I've half read and then half read again or finished at some point, but I'm through it like on my second round of attempting to absorb all the information. But fun books, I think I have 5 like fantasy stories I'm in the middle of at any point in time.
I can't do that. I'm one. I am very singular with respect to books, fantasy, fiction,
What if you're in a
nonfiction,
different
whatever.
mood?
Then I listen to music.
Okay. All right. I feel this way at work as well, where like I have certain moods where certain projects get done very, very well, and certain moods where those projects would not get done in any way, shape, or form. And so I have my to-do list organized by what kind of mood I'm in today.
Hmm. Maybe I need to try that.
I'm pretty similar
It
to
works
that
really
too.
well.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you're in like a tech automation, the right kind of lazy mood, I have a whole list of projects to work on when I'm in that mood, right? And if you're in a writing mood, like I have a whole bunch of projects to work on for that, right? So it's just there's very different skill sets and brain power that's required in different places of what we do, and particularly in accounting. So I try to organize it by similar mindset and similar time blocks that you need to get the projects done.
That's a good optimization right there.
It's a different one for sure. That comes from a map brain. All right.
That's
Any
awesome.
other thoughts on this topic?
I mean, I think we could probably talk about it for another 10 hours, but I feel like the message was delivered in the period of time that we've allocated.
Great. Well, to recap, there is a right kind of lazy, there is a wrong kind of productive. putting definitions around this and understanding the way you learn, the way your brain works, the way that you interact with things and need to learn and experience in your career and trajectory is very important to understand how to be the right kind of lazy and how to be the right kind of productive as well.
Nailed it.
Excellent recap. Thanks, Liz.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Have a good one. Good to see you all. Let's hopefully see everyone else on another episode.
See y'all.
The Center for Accounting Transformation provides business professionals with a network for utilizing innovations that are ready for adoption, the training and resources necessary to apply those innovations, and an opportunity to engage the talent and community needed to further the pursuit of innovative accounting practices that drive responsible and mindful business performance. Find out more at our website, www.improvetheworld.net. And if you're interested in sharing your own transformation stories, please contact us there.